My name is Leonard Hochberg, and I'm the U.S. coordinator for the Mackinder Forum. Our speaker today is Eitan Shamir. Professor Shamir is the managing director of the Begin Sadat Center for Strategic Studies at Bar-Ilan University. Before pursuing an academic career, Dr. Shamir was the head of the National Security Doctrine Department at the Ministry of Strategic Affairs in the Prime Minister's Office, Israel. Some of his most notable publications include Transforming Command, the Pursuit of Mission Command in the US, UK, and Israeli Armies with Stanford University Press, Insurgencies and Counterinsurgencies, National Styles and Strategic Cultures, co-authored with Beatrice Hauser and with Cambridge University Press, The Art of Military Innovation, co-authored with Edward Luttwak, and that came out with Harvard University Press and was reviewed in the Wall Street Journal and Foreign Affairs. His most recent publication is Moshe Dayan, The Making of a Strategist, published by Cambridge University Press this year. Having closely read the very fine suggested readings by Professor Shamir, I'm convinced that his talk today will be both informative and enlightening. And with that, Professor Shamir, please begin.
So I guess it's good evening here, and it's good afternoon in the US and wherever people are. Thank you again for having me. It's an honor and a pleasure to talk in your distinguished forum. So the lecture today, I'm going to talk about my recent book. It just came out a few months ago. It came earlier also in an earlier version also came in English. I just want to take the time, so I'll use my phone. Yeah, okay. So you can see the book cover came out in Cambridge University Press in the military history series. And I decided to write the book on Moshe Dayan mainly because the topic and the persona of Moshe Dayan, I came to realize that this is incredibly, his persona is incredibly interesting and also complicated. He's been probably one of the most controversial figures in Israel history. But he's also a person who was involved almost in every major event that has to do with war and peace in Israel's first 40 years of existence. Moshe Dayan, as you can see here, has probably been the most branded figure in Israel's history. You can see from Lego pieces to T-shirts to cups, and his own photograph on his picture that he used to give away, and later on these would have been sold in auctions for quite hefty sums of money. You can see him in various movies of the period. He had really this aura of a Hollywood star, and I'm actually quite surprised that Hollywood have not taken this character and made a movie about him. I think it's very much deserved. The topic very much deserved it. As you know, the most distinguished thing Dayan had was his eye patch, his black eye patch. And I'm quoting here from Julian Thompson, General Julian Thompson, who led the British Expeditionary Force in the Falkland War, the Commando Brigade, who spearheaded the landing in the Falkland and took most of the heavy fighting. And he wrote about Dayan the following. He said, Dayan was a charismatic commander who had no need to contrive persona by wearing a pair of pearl-handled revolvers like Patton, hanging grenades on his equipment like Ridgway, or sporting two badges in his beret like Montgomery. A black patch covering an eye lost fighting in Syria was his instantly recognizable trademark. Such was his adulation heaped on him that for a while eye patches even became fashion accessories. And as Dayan soon also discovered that it was an accessory that made the other sex very attractive to him. But beyond all this branding, when we are looking at Israeli generals, there are certainly great field generals in Israel, like Ariel Sharon, Arik, or Musa Peled, who spearheaded the counterattack in the Golan in 1973, or Yigal Alon, who was a famous Palmach leader in 1948 and the Southern Front commander. We will mention him later. But I think when you look at the persona of Dayan, he was much more than just a general. He was a general and he was a diplomat, and I'm going to address that as well. And a quick look that a quick survey that I did in Amazon, looking at those books, these are the type of books that have like the 100 most famous generals, or of the in history, or the 20 most the best generals in the 20th century. The only general you find there, Israeli general, again and again, the only one that is noted is Dayan. And there is a reason, I found out, and I would make the argument that there is a reason that that people remember him in this way. So one of my major arguments in the book was that Dayan was a real strategist, that the way he was thinking was in strategic terms, and that you can track, and this is what I'm trying to do, his evolution as a strategist. So Dayan certainly evolves through the years. You don't meet the same Dayan, or I would put it a different way. You meet a different Dayan in every decade. So he certainly develops. Now, of course, there's big experts, probably even big experts than I here in this forum for strategy, but I'll just use some of the quotes here that I was using along the book in order to make a common language in sense of what is strategy. So strategy is certainly something that exists in a state of conflict between two or more players. If there's no conflict, there's no strategy. We need a conflict to have strategy. Unlike games that are governed by rules, with the time, there's a whole symmetric rules between the teams. In strategy, there's no rules. Therefore, there's a lot of uncertainty. You don't know when it ends. You don't know what the other side is going to do. There's a lot of uncertainty. Therefore, friction and chance is part of strategy. Strategy is the art of action. It is a theory. You can theorize strategy, but in the end, if it's not practical, if it doesn't work in the real world, then it's useless. And then we are all familiar with the level of strategies, right? Tactics, operation, strategy, and there is a grand strategy. And it was Edward Luttwak who said that the only outcome that matters is the one on the grand strategy. So you can win 100 battles, but in the end, and even you can win the war, but in the end, if your situation on the grand strategic level, on the political level, for the long term has not been improved, you have accomplished nothing. Okay. And then I'll use the term, and I'm using it extensively across the book, is the two concepts that were defined by Henry Mintzberg, who's a scholar from the organizational studies side, who made the difference between emergent strategy and deliberate strategy. So deliberate strategy is what we all recognize as strategy. So it's an analysis that follows by planning, and then we communicate the plan, and then we carry it the execution, and And then we get some feedback in terms of how it worked, and we change the plan accordingly and so on. Emergent strategy is very different. You have some kind of hypothesis as about what's the situation. You test it quickly, and you understand the feedback, and then you make quick changes. And it's more kind of a learning loops. So it's trying really to understand the situation as it evolved under an extreme assumption that the situation is in a constant move. It's a constant change of the situation. Therefore, you're not trying to impose the plan on reality, but you are trying, as to say, to work with the changes that are happening in reality. So it's something which is much more flexible. Of course, these are analytic, and the two exist in parallel. It's never that's only one type of strategy exists. Usually, what we do is we formulate the deliberate strategy, but we have to be very sensitive to the emergent strategy. So this is how this is taken from Mintzberg. This is how he shows it. He saw how we in this graphic picture that we are trying to impose this deliberate strategy, but then you have the emergent strategy that evolves, and then the two somehow meets together, and the real strategy is this combination of the changes that are occurring in the environment and in reality, and deliberate the real strategy is this combination of the two. Now, my argument in the book, this is one of my central, it's not the only one, but this is one of my central argument, that looking at Dayan, studying Dayan, he's the most extreme embodiment of this approach of emergent strategy. Okay, what you see here is, it's not a mistake, it's a donkey. And the reason is, you see a donkey is because Dayan had a phrase, he had many phrases, but one of his most known phrases was that only a donkey doesn't change his mind. And this was his reaction when he used to change his mind a lot about important issues, strategic issues. It could be a change from one day to the other. And then when people came to him and say, how come you change your mind so quickly? And he would answer, only a donkey doesn't change his mind. Okay, that's like something that's characterized Dayan in the sense that he would change his mind. But if you follow his reasoning, usually he changed his mind, literally sometimes from one day to the other, sometimes it's from 1 hour to the other, because of the changes that he saw in the reality around him, that something triggered this change. So he understood differently. And what was unique about it, that he never fell in love with his plan. So this is something that his early biographer, Tevet, who knew him very well and wrote one of the first biography about him. This biography ended in 1967, the time period, because that's where the period that the biography was written. So it's not very up to date. But because Tevet knew him very well, you can really understand the character of Dayan from this biography. And he wrote about him that one of his most prominent characteristics was his extreme reservation about any subjugation and to prearranged sets of ideologies. He was noted for his relentless aspiration to re-examine without prejudice the ever-developing and ever-changing reality. He had no trouble changing his mind when circumstances turned out to be different than expected, or when he realized his mistakes. Nevertheless, he remained loyal his entire life to himself and to his fundamental values, his love for the land and for Zionist enterprise. To these two values, he devoted his life. This is why you see that it's not surprising that Dayan was the first Israeli politician who broke from the left party of the Labour Party and moved to Menachem Begin, the Likud party. This was something that at the time was shocking to everyone, a shocking move. Nobody in Israel could understand it because the divide between the two was something that you never do. It's like a complete wall that nobody passes from one place to the other. Dayan was the first one who did it, and it shook the entire political Israeli system that he was willing to do it. And he had no trouble doing it because he was not committed to any ideology of the right or left. He just felt that he's going to do whatever is good for the country and whatever is good for him in that sense. Okay, that's another typical thing of Dayan talking about emergent strategy. What does it mean emergent? I was asking myself, what does it mean emergent strategy? And one of the striking things, and I had the opportunity to interview both two of his secretaries that are still alive, who were with him, his aide-de-camp. Some of the people are not living, no longer with us today, like Shlomo Gazit, the head of intelligence that was his aide-de-camp, Mordechai Baron, and some others. And one of the very interesting things they told him about him, but there were a lot of things that I talk about the book in terms of his managerial style, also about his leadership style, and we will talk about that too, but his managerial style. This is a typical, I think, a typical schedule of someone who's senior level, okay? You can see this meetings and activities, different activities that are planned usually months, like 3 months or 2 months ahead. The more the person is important, the more his diary is loaded with those activities, those commitments. If you need to stick something in the middle, you have to change the entire, shift the entire thing, there's no, so this is the typical thing that we see. What he told me that Dayan, both as a chief of staff and as a defense minister, he had a completely different diary. This was his diary. His diary had, and he insisted on this. And how did he do it? I'm not sure. And I'm not sure that today even you can do it in today's reality. But it reflects how he used to think. So he instructed his staff to only put one meeting, the two necessary meetings. One is the general headquarters meeting, the general staff meeting, and one is the cabinet meeting that he had to meet with the government, and to leave the rest empty. Why did he needed the rest empty? Because he used to say that every day when he gets up in the morning, he makes the assessment for the same day and he decides what are the priorities for that specific day. And then he makes a plan where he wants to go and what he wants to do and who he wants to see. Now, one of the things that allowed this to happen was that he delegated a lot to his staff. He delegated to such an extreme that some of his professional staff, like those who did budgets, he used to tell them, look, I'm sitting once a year with you and I'm giving you all the instructions you need. You know your job. You go out, you do what you need, and I'll see you next year. So I don't want to see you again. Okay, so that's how extreme it was. But again, for me, it's more a reflection of his philosophy about how things should be managed. Things that came helped me understand Dayan really. Again, many people were, including historians and people who were working with him, always said they had a hard time understanding his line of thinking and how come Dayan would have said something in the morning and something else in the evening. And I read in John Gaddis, who is a great historian, and he wrote in his book on grand strategy that he used a quote by Scott Fitzgerald, who defined first-rate intelligence as the ability to hold two opposed ideas in the mind at the same time and still retain the ability to function. And then he also said that a successful strategist needs to combine within a single mind the hedgehog's sense of direction and the fox's sensitivity to the surrounding, while retaining again the ability to function. Using, of course, the hedgehogs and the fox. The fox knows a lot of things. The hedgehog knows one thing, but in a very specialized way. So he was using it, and when I read it, then I started to understand this type of thinking that Dayan had and his approach to strategic issues. So this is the quick CV of Dayan. Just those of you who are less familiar with him, he was born in Kibbutz Gadgania, but moves to Nahal, which was a moshav. A moshav was not as communal as a kibbutz. The people in the moshav, they owned their own plot of land, but there was some communal shared. There was some shared activities. There was a community life, but it was not communal as a kibbutz. So these two types of settlement, they had their own differences. In 1941, Dayan loses his eye in Syria, which is today Lebanon. Actually, in today's terms, he loses it in Lebanon. And I'll talk a little bit about this incident. 1953, he's appointed as the IDF Chief of Staff. 56, he leads the Sinai campaign, what we called Kadesh operation. 58, he retires. Between 59 and 64, he becomes the agricultural minister. 1966, he conducts his Vietnam tour, which has a lot of importance to his career later on. And between 67 and 74, it's the defense minister. Of course, he becomes the defense minister just before the 6 Days War, and he leads the attrition war against the Egyptians, and then the 1973 war. 1977-79, he becomes the foreign minister under the Menachem Begin government, and he is one of the people who lead the peace agreement with Egypt. 1981, he dies in a relatively early age when he's 66. So this was a kind of a snapshot. I'll talk a little bit about his life. In specific, I'll try to dedicate more time to the Sinai campaign, because this was one of his height of his, I think, of his career. We will have some time to really just touch quickly on other points of his life. All of them are very, very interesting. Also reflects, again, very important moments in Israel's history. But I don't have time, of course, to go over all. You can go over it. I sent some articles, and you can, of course, read the book. And also we will have the Q&A, and you can ask me more about it. So young Dayan, again, he was born in Nahal, 1921. This was like a frontier. The new Moshav was surrounded by Bedouins. Dayan grew up riding on horseback. He received his first rifle when he was just a teen as a present, a birthday present. They usually used to give then the young boys either a gun or a knife. That was the educational present you used to get. On the other hand, so you can see him here in his horse, and you can see the Bedouins, which was the neighbors. Dayan was fascinated by these Bedouins, and actually he would try to imitate their way of life. On the left, you can see his young class. Actually, they received very good education, including learning Russian literature. They had very good teachers at the time. So in addition to that he had a very wild, I would say, youth. They also received pretty good education at the time. Okay, so this is when his military career starts. It's what we call the Arab Revolt, 1936, 1939. Really just before the World War II, an Arab rebellion, what today we would call maybe the Palestinians, then they would call the Arabs. We can see the Arab bands on the picture below, and then you see the British on the train and 2 Arab captives. By the way, they're using them as a human shield. There was no problem at that time to use human shield. Nobody complained about it, and the Arabs used to attack the train. So Arab used to attack both the British and the Jewish communities. So the British didn't have enough manpower, so they recruited the Jewish auxiliary force, and Dayan joined the British Army or the British Police. He goes through the sergeant course in the British Army, and he leads this company. You can see he still has his 2 eyes here. You can see young Dayan. So he leads this mobile company, but he complains a lot about the British methods. He's saying this is completely useless. They are trying to catch guerrilla fighters. The guerrilla choose when and where to fight. What they do is patrol. They learn their routine, and Dayan feels that this is what they're doing is really not very helpful. So he doesn't like this period at all. and he's very, very frustrated. So then he meets two people that are very influential in his life and also on the IDF in general. One is Yitzhak Sadeh, who was a Russian officer in the Red Army, and he fought in the Russian Civil War, the Red against the Whites. And he comes with this new idea about initiative and offensive, and how to bring the fight to the enemy. Another person on the scene that arrives and has a huge influence is Charles Salt Wingate, the British unusual commander. He comes as an intelligence officer, but then he joins the Jews. He sympathizes with the Jews, so he organized the Jews and he learns them. And his motive is offensive, again, initiative, owning the night, fighting guerrilla and guerrilla methods, and so on. And Dayan is fascinated. Dayan is one of his students, one of his followers. And later on, when he becomes chief of staff, he says on Wingate, he taught us everything we know. Okay, soon when the revolt is being is dying slowly by forced British measures, suddenly all those who are holding weapons in the eyes of the British are insurgents, also the Jews, and Dayan finds himself in prison. This was a very interesting experience for him. In prison, he finds himself locked up with other Jews from other organizations like the what they call the Stern Gang, the Etzel, and other Jewish organizations, but also with Arabs. And he becomes the leader of those Jews already. He shows himself as a very central guy. And he does a lot of negotiations with the British at the time. They find him a very interesting person. And soon, when the Second World is starting, and the British are they are feeling the pressure from the Germans, they're releasing the Jews because now they need them back again on the front lines. Dayan is asked to lead a patrol into what was then controlled Vichy Lebanon. And he leads strange groups of Australian, a Bedouin who was one of their guides, who was one of the Bedouins who were fighting against the British, by the way, and Dayan is recruiting him because he believed that he knows best the area, the territory. And they find themselves in a close encounter with French soldiers. They try to take a position, and when they kill a few French soldiers. But when Dayan is holding his binoculars up, there's a bullet that hits the glass, and the glass goes into his eye, and that's where he's injured, and that's where he's getting his famous eye patch. Now, for some years, he will try to see if he can get like a glass eye instead of the patch, but because the surrounding of the eye was so hurt, was so damaged, and the medical knowledge at the time, they didn't know how to fix it, so he had to stay with the eye patch. But again, soon enough, he discovered that actually the eye patch can be an advantage. So what do we learn about Dayan in his formative years? That he grows into and with the conflict. He's politicized. He always looks at the conflict. He very early on he understands, and he writes about the conflict between the Arab and Jews. So he understands that everything is part of the politics, and is politically contextualized. It's not just forced by itself. He has a lot of admiration to the Arabs. He's very much interested in the Arabs. He's interested in learning them. He's both insurgent and he's a counterinsurgent. He find himself in both roles. So we see things from both directions. He has very interesting mentors like Charles Lord Wingate. He has both formal training, like the sergeant course in the British Army, and an informal one. And his experience is actually small skirmishes, battle experience, not more than that. So this is, in that sense, it's quite limited. So in 48, Dayan finds himself a bit left behind because He was injured. His friends advanced, and they became commanders of battalions or even brigades. Even Yigal alone, his competitor, becomes even more high-ranked, and he's a commander of an entire front. And Dayan is somewhat left behind until he's asked by his old mentor, Yitzhak Sadeh, to form a battalion, a commando battalion. But he has no troops. And what he does is, I don't know if some of you may be old enough to remember films like Dirty Dozens. So he takes all sorts. He takes those guys, nobody wants to take them. He takes the professional troublemakers. He takes them out of prison. He takes the Lehi, you know, the what they used to call them, the Sterngang, yeah, the British used to call them, the most extremist ones. He takes foreign volunteers that don't know Hebrew and they speak different languages and they cannot communicate. So he takes all these guys. He tells them, look, come with me. You'll have nice jeeps. The girls would love you. And we'll do great. And don't worry, I'll train you and you'll be okay. And they do, and they get all these sorts. They get this armored car from the Jordanians. This is they get into a fight, and they get this the only armored car that the IDF, one of the only one that the IDF had, with a cannon. And he puts this together, these guys together. It's called the 89 Commando Battalion. Still today, the IDF has a commander brigade. The commander brigade is called 89 Commander Brigade, under following the 89 Commando Battalion of Dayan. Now, Dayan doesn't know a lot what to do with this commando brigade, because never, you know, he doesn't have the experience really. But it's by chance that he goes to the US. He's asked by Ben Gurion, who already knows him, to go and make the arrangements for the funeral of Colonel Marcus, who was advising the IDF and by accident was shot. And they do the funeral in West Point. And then he goes to New York and he meets someone by the name of Colonel Baum, who was a Jew, who was serving under Patton and conducted a very daring raid to rescue American POW from German camps. And Baum actually, they sit in a hotel bar together. And Dayan asked him, okay, I'm going back to Palestine. What I'm going to do with this commando brigade? You did it already, so give me some advice. And Baum actually gives him like the 6 points. He tells him, there's always a road, and use it. Concentrate all your forces, even against some objective. Do whatever you can to create an illusion that your force is much larger. Attack on a narrow front, preferably in single column. Use your firepower as much to frighten as to kill. Terrify the enemy is almost as good as dead one. Terrified enemy is always as good as a dead one. When commanding a small force, movement is all important. Stop and you lose your greatest advantage. Okay, so he comes back to his battalion, and he's stationed somewhere not far from Ben Gurion Airport today. And he hears that there is a brigade, Iftach Brigade, which is a Palmach brigade. What used to be called the Palmach is the striking companies, the elite force of the IDF at the time. And they are stuck at the outskirts of Lud, the town, the Arab town next to the airport. And he shows up with his commando brigade, with their jeeps and their vehicles and whatever they have. And he just runs across the city from one side to the other side, doing exactly what Baum told him, shooting in every weapon he had. And by doing this, what the Americans they called later in their doctrine a thunder run, so he conducted a thunder run. So he shocks the Arabs that are defending the city, and gives the opportunity to the Iftach Brigade to follow up on him and to actually take the city. But he is the hero of the day. This probably is first controversy because immediately there's a debate: who is responsible for the fall of the city? The infantry that followed up the Palmach, or was it him? And etc., etc. So, and of course, some of the commanders who were fighting at the time didn't like the idea that he showed up, took all the fame, and then they say he disappeared. He disappeared actually because Ben Gurion called him and said that he has to come and see him immediately, because Ben Gurion had a different idea what to do with him. Ben Gurion decided that he wants to make him into the Jerusalem Front commander. Jerusalem Front commander was interesting because he didn't do a lot of fighting there, but quite immediately he started to negotiate with his counterpart, which was Abdallah El-Tel, the Jordanian commander. And one of the first things he did, he was telling to El-Tel, why do we have to work through mediators? We can just talk directly. And Abdallah El-Tel was surprised, but he agreed. And they started to talk and they got to agreement. And this was the first experience of diplomacy of Dayan, which was to be one of his major hallmarks and I think one of his major strengths, actually. So he kept on and he went to the next thing was he found himself in Abdallah's, the King Abdallah of Jordan palace, negotiating for Israel. And the next thing he was in Rhodos in the negotiation for the ceasefire in 49. So he received a lot of already of not only battle experience, but mostly diplomatic experience. So Dayan as a leader, daring, taking risk, leading from the front, he was very courageous. He was really again, the embodiment of the leader who leads in front. When he wanted to leave when Ben-Gurion called him to leave his battalion and wanted to appointed him to the Jerusalem front commander, actually there was a delegation of his soldiers that went to Ben-Gurion and asked Ben-Gurion to keep him as their commander because they admired him so much. Okay, so the next period when he becomes the chief of staff, now I'm of course rushing forward. So during Dayan's time as chief of staff, and in general in 1950, before he was chief of staff, he was the northern commander and the southern commander. And then he became the deputy chief of staff or the head of the general staff and then the chief of staff. But during this period, and this is a distinction that Dayan himself made, Israel had two problems, and still today. One is the fundamental security, which is always preparing for the next war, the next big war. And the other one is what we call the ongoing security, is the constant small attacks and counterattacks, the low intensity, the guerrilla warfare, the insurgencies, etc., you name it. But this is the ongoing thing that is always the Israeli army has to be minded of, and has its own risks and cost in terms of the nation. So this is how Dayan saw it. Dayan, on the one hand, what he had as a chief of staff, the two threats or the two challenges was terror on the borders. The other one is another round of war of the Arab states. So how to prepare the military for the next war, because it was obvious that there will be a next war. The challenge is the military that he inherent was in complete crisis after 49. Why? It's a separate lecture, but the IDF, most of the old veterans of 49, 48 war, the independent left. There were a lot of new immigrants who came. They knew very little Hebrew. Some of them had very little education. They were in poor health state. So the military was in a very poor situation. So not much that he can do with this military. And what Dayan decided to do in order to solve everything is what he called military operations during time of peace. So to conduct military operation during time of peace. And what the benefit of it, the way he saw it, is it will create leaders and esprit de corps by doing this operation. I mean, he will use this operation to develop leaders. It will boost morale. He will set the performance and standards. They will get combat experience, and it will create deterrence and extract the price from the enemy. And it will also satisfy the internal political issues, because of course the terrorism on the border created unrest among the Israeli society. So this is basically what Dayan said in one of his speeches. This is actually, to those of you, this is the picture where he gives the eulogy for Roy Rothberg on the Gaza border. And those of you who know that we can talk about the relevancy of Gaza later on. But what he said here is that we cannot, because Israel then didn't have a good, there were no fences on the border. Actually, there were no obstacles on the border. In some areas, you cannot even distinct this is a border. and he can say we cannot guard every point. So the only thing we can do is extract the price. So we need to work on our deterrence, basically. And because he had a useless army, he forms under the commander Ariel Sharon the Unit 101. By the way, the first instance he actually opposes Unit 101. He doesn't want it because he doesn't like the idea that there is an elite unit and all the rest of the army is dragging behind. He didn't like this idea. But then he understood that he can use the unit in a different way. And the way he used this unit which was an elite unit, that he merged this unit into the paratrooper brigade after a few months of its existence. And he used all the unit's soldiers, the operators, as the commanders of the paratroopers. And then he integrated, he sent the paratroopers for operation, integrating other elements of the military with the paratroopers. So it's Unit 101 who set the standard then for the paratroopers, and then the paratroopers would set the standard for the rest of the army. And this is how he changed or reformed the military. So retaliation operation that kept going. The first phase up to 53, Kippur operation, which was a bit of a blunder because there were a lot of civilians who died. Then Dayan changes the objectives and he says, we are going only to hit military posts. We're not going to go to the villages again, even though those terrorists came out of the villages. And it was problematic. And in some sense, paradoxically, it led to escalation. So that was the first part. The second part, that's where the up to Kalkilia, that Dayan understood in this big operation, because the operation became bigger and bigger, they spiral a little bit out of control. Dayan understands that this is the end of the period. And he says that he says to Ben-Gurion, we've reached the end of the retaliation operation after this one big operation. He understands the culmination point. This is a phrase from Clausewitz, of course. He understands that this is the point where he should change his idea. He should change his concept. It doesn't work anymore. And the new concept he has, especially on the Egyptian front, the only way to stop it is to go for a big war, to go for another big round. Now, the military was looking at another round only in 1960, 1951, because everyone was sure that the IDF will not be ready for another round before it. But things sped up, and there were development around it. One of it is, of course, the Czechoslovakian arms deal, which is actually the Soviet arms deals, when Nasser is getting a lot of weapons from the Russians, from the Soviets, and this could completely change the equation. And also, there are certain steps that Nasser is taking that it becomes a real problem for Israel. Okay, so the Sinai campaign, 56, we are now countdown to the Sinai campaign. Why go to war? Ben-Gurion is very hesitant. Dayan wants to go to war. So how do you do it? When do you do it? And then the story of the alliance. Just the background, and again, I don't have time to go into it with details, but the real issue is Nasser. Nasser, in his approach to lead the Arab world, is doing a lot of havoc and supporting a lot of movements in the Arab world. He has this position that he should lead the Arab world and he should unite the Arab world. And he's becoming a danger not only to Israel, but also in the eyes of some of the other powers, the Western powers in the region. And again, the background, the geostrategic background is a shift. We are in a period of a shift between the old powers of France and Britain and the new powers, the Soviet Union and the United States. So we are in this period of the power transition, and it will come into play, of course, in the Sinai campaign. So the timeline for the Suez Canal, to the Suez War, just to give you a glimpse. September 1955, it's the Czechoslovakian arms deal. 56, Nasser nationalized the Suez Canal. October, and July, he nationalized the Suez Canal, which is a big move. 22, 24th October, it's the Sevres. Sevres is a place next to Paris where there is a convention between the British, the French, and Israel, and that's where the conspiracy, the famous conspiracy. This time I know we can say it's a real conspiracy, and unlike some conspiracy that doesn't exist, we know very soon we knew everything about this conspiracy. But at the time, it was a secret conspiracy between the French, the British, and the Israelis. 56 October 1929, the operation begins. They drop next to the canal, and 30, the Allies' ultimatum for the Egyptians and the Israelis, and they start the Operation Musketeer. In reality, they start an air campaign, but they're on the ground only on the 5th of October. So this will have major ramifications of this timeline. Okay, I'll say just this because we're running out of time, that the Dayan is preparing well, first of all, in October 10, there is Operation Kalkilia, and I have to say the British at the time, they have an alliance with Jordan, defense pact, and they are actually preparing to fight Israel. They've delivered some threats to Israel, and they're preparing to fight Israel. The plan is called the Catapult, and they're putting this plan together to destroy the Israeli Air Force. They are getting ready, the British, yes, to fight Israel. At the same time, Dayan is putting together a plan to conquer, to offensive on Sinai. It's called Kadesh 1. But this is with coordination with the French. It's already the French already came to the Israelis and asked them to join them in an operation against Nasser. Nasser, for them, he's a menace. They owned part of the company that owns the canal, and he nationalized it. But moreover, they see Nasser activities helping the Algerians rebels against the French forces, the French settlers, is a bigger risk, and therefore they want to remove Nasser. But their condition is they want the British on board for many political reasons, but also the British military capability. The British have bases in Cyprus, so they want the British on board. So the idea is that basically the idea that the British and the French have the role that they have for Israel is that Israel will give them the pretext, the excuse to go in. Israel will initiate a full-scale offensive into Sinai. They will threaten the Suez Canal in 72 hours. Its forces will be next to the canal. Go ahead, one. And the IDF will approach the canal. The French and British will publicly demand that both forces, the Egyptian and the Israelis, will back down, because this is the danger to international maritime. Of course, the Israelis will comply. The Egyptian will probably not comply. So that will be to give the pretext to the French and British to intervene, as they're responsible adult who comes to make order among these native kids who are messing around. Now, Ben-Gurion didn't like it at all. Ben-Gurion said, first of all, why would Israel be the aggressor in this scenario? And then what even was the biggest fear for him was that Britain and France will get cold feet the last minute, and they will do nothing. And Israel would be left alone, stuck alone in a war that it was not prepared for. And what Ben-Gurion believed, that the IDF is not prepared for this type of war, to stand alone against the Egyptian military. What he also had this fear that the Egyptians, they have their big air force, and they had bombers, and he was afraid that the Egyptians will bomb Tel Aviv. He was during the Blitz in London, so he saw what is the destruction capabilities of bombers and he believed that they will turn Tel Aviv to rubble. I mean, this was his. It turned out to be baseless. So here is what Dayan did. Dayan actually offered. He was thinking about an idea how to make everything work for all sides, and he came to Ben-Gurion with this idea. Look, what we are going to do is a different idea of a campaign. I mean, we need to please the British and French. But how they are going to do it? We're going to avoid the risks that you are fearing from. We're going to commit our best unit, paratrooper unit. We're going to drop them in what was the Mitle Pass, which was not far from the Suez Canal. And then we're going to tell the French and the British, look, you wanted us to be close to the canal? We're already close to the canal. So you can go ahead immediately and give the ultimatum and go into with your forces. But what happens if they don't? If they back down, then we will send some units, and they will pull out the paratroopers, and we will tell the Egyptians, because there was nothing there where the paratroops where we are going to drop the paratroopers. It's just an empty space in the Sinai. We are going to tell basically the Egyptians that we had no intention. We had no intention of attacking them. It was just a mistake. You remember in Ukraine they had this before the invasion of the Russian invasion. They had what they used to call green people or something like that, small green people. So this is the small green people of the Israelis. We had this battalion. It went by mistake to this area, and we just pulled them out and just forget about it. This is how we came to Bergen. Well, what you see here on the left is when they were sitting in Sevres. I mean, what you have to imagine, that they were sitting in this outskirts chateau in Paris, in Sevres. It was a small chateau, the British, the French, and they were discussing it, and the Israelis. And it was Peres, Shimon Peres, was the director of the Ministry of Defense then, and also close to Ben-Gurion, Dayan and Ben-Gurion. That's it, 3 people. And they were only one who knew this, this conspiracy from the Israeli side. And Dayan asked from Peres, when they were discussing this idea, he asked Peres whether he has something to write on. And Peres had the cigarette. They used to smoke them. So he pulled out this cigarette packet and gave him the paper that wraps the cigarettes. And Dayan sketched this map of the campaign plan. And Dayan not only told this to Ben-Gurion and convinced him that he needs to go ahead, but you can see the initials on the left in Hebrew, David Ben-Gurion. He made him sign it. So this is like to become an official paper. So both Dayan gave the date. You can see the date here, 24/10/56. You can see what Dayan wrote. This is the plan for Sinai campaign. And you can see the initials of Ben-Gurion. He made him sign it because he wanted really to Ben-Gurion. Because the way Dayan saw it, this is a one-time opportunity that small Israel can fight along the French and British forces. He was thinking about this alliance as a great opportunity. And he believed also in the army that he trained. So he had a very strong belief in the IDF. And he also felt that the benefits, especially in terms of the French, Israel was then under weapons embargo. The US didn't give any weapons to Israel at the time. Nobody gave Israel weapons. The only ones who were ready to give weapons to Israel, advanced weapons, were the French. But the French said, look, hey, we will give you this, but you have to join us in this war. Otherwise, you're not going to get it, right? So you need to show, your value. So for Dayan, he really wanted to do it. And he had to overcome Ben-Gurion's hesitations. Okay, so basically the genius of Dayan's here, if you notice that he created a plan where you start the war from the end. And he left the 2 scenarios. The 2 scenarios, one is that the war can go on, and the other scenario is that the war needs to be folded or to be stopped. He left them both open until the last minute. So you can play with the 2 scenarios in parallel. And this was, I think, his real stroke of genius in that specific planning. And this is how he convinced Ben-Gurion to go ahead and do this. What really happened is that when Dayan comes back to the field, he cannot share with his field commanders, what are the plans, because this is very secretive, and they don't understand. They don't understand that, and they believe that once the paratroops jumped the campaign has started, and they jump ahead as well, all the forces. And Dayan is very angry because he promised Ben-Gurion that he's not going to move the rest of the forces until the British and French are coming in. So everything on the ground, he had this brilliant plan, but because he could not share it with his commanders, everything went straight. Everything went to not according to his brilliant plan, but because the campaign plan itself, in terms of the movement of forces, was well rehearsed and well done. The battle plans, everything went very well for the IDF, and they overwhelmed the Egyptian defenses, and they went along, and the Egyptian army was completely shattered, and they reached all their objectives very, very quickly, way before by the way, the French and British, it took them 72 hours, but not because they were hesitant, because they were just very, very slow to move. They were very cumbersome, they were very slow, and it just took them very long. And when they started to move, the IDF already reached all its objectives in the Sinai. So the famous thing Dayan said in regarding to this commanders of his that jumped in so quickly was what became a famous motto of the IDF, which is better to be engaged in restraining the noble horses than prodding the lazy oxen. So in the end, he said, look, I rather have these commanders who show initiative and jump in than having to deal with those people who are slow to move and hesitant and so on. The only commander that he actually laid off, released from duty during the campaign, was a commander that was slow to move. And Dayan blamed him for not moving quick enough, not taking the initiative, and he relieved him of his duty. All the other commanders, some of them he was furious about what they did, including Ariel Sharon, who was with the paratroopers then. But this is, again, it's a different story, that it ended in one of the fiercest battle of this campaign. But Dayan forgave him because Dayan saw the brilliance, the tactical brilliance of Sharon. And he groomed it all this way. By the way, he punished Sharon by sending him to the British Staff and Command course. And this was a punishment because Sharon wanted to be in the thick of the action. Sharon wanted to go ahead, and he said, everyone is going to advance and I'm going to study. But once he went to the Staff and Command College, the British Staff and Command College, he found it very valuable and actually came back with very good tools. Remember that at the time, those instructors in the Staff and Command College, in the British Staff and Command, there were the people who fought in Normandy, fought in Africa. I mean, these were really, really experienced people who knew how to conduct campaigns and fight wars. Okay, so that's another text from Moshe Dayan's diary, his own diary. He says, depending upon the instance, I prefer excessive initiative in action, even if it involves some mistakes here and there, to the passivity of sit and do nothing and covering yourself with paper and 7 authorization for an operation before its execution. Okay, this is important. So 56, after the Kadesh, he leaves his office. And at the time, 66, he finds himself as an MP, Knesset member, member of the parliament, and he's very bored. He doesn't like the work of just one and another MP, and he's looking for adventures. Dayan, he liked the field. He liked the smell, he liked the feel of being in the field, and he misses the adventures. And he had this opportunity to join as a reporter in Vietnam. He first visits all the major commanders, including a meeting with McNamara before he goes to the field. Then he goes to the field and he joins different US American units. He's very much impressed by the use of the helicopters. He's with the Rangers, he's with the Marines. He has a lot of discussions. He records all this in what becomes his Vietnam diary, which I'm not sure came out in English. I'm not sure it came out in English, but there's a little bit about it, of course, in my book and other books about his impressions in Vietnam. He sent this report to McNamara, by the way, of his impressions. He has some very, very interesting insight about Vietnam War. It is important because he writes also to Israeli newspapers, so he's in the public eye. He's in the public eye still as someone, even 10 years after, someone the public can trust, someone the public knows that he understands war. Okay, in the 67 war, just a few days before the beginning of the war, where there's a lot of pressure that is building up, he's being called by the government to take the defense portfolio. So he joins in only a few days before the war, but he puts all his weight into the decision of taking the preemptive strike, because the government is very hesitant whether to do it. The military wants to do it, but more than this, I have to say that he shows up like the Messiah. He shows up like the savior. Like everyone is completely depressed in Israel. People have the feeling that this is the end of the country because Israel is surrounded by all these strong militaries. And when Dayan is appointed, people are relieved, like really, this is the Messiah has come. So he brings a lot of this morale boost to him, but in strategic terms, he also focused the war plans, which were all over the place. He tells the IDF, look, you have one mission alone. You have to destroy the Egyptian army in Sinai. Leave all the rest alone. The rest is not important. Once we finish the Egyptian army in the Sinai, we can go and do other things. We can go to other fronts. We can build on that. And this is what I found was a very important part of that he played in the war. Yeah, so he's again on the Time magazine. I think he's the only Israeli general again that was twice on the Time magazine. And you can see how Israel won the war. General Dayan, again, his fame and his height. And this is a stage photo. This is a stage photo that Dayan took care because he had his mind on the media and on publicity. He was very aware of this. And you can see him marching into the old city in Jerusalem towards the Wailing Wall. On his side, you can see Yitzhak Rabin, who was the chief of staff, and Uzi Narkis, who was the commander of the Southern Front. And he told the prime minister, Levi Eshkol, then that he should not come because there's still snipers, it's still dangerous. And while he told him this, he went on and got all the attention. In the afternoon, the prime minister came, but nobody gave any attention. And of course, this picture was in the front page of all the Israeli newspaper the day after, and so on. So this is also the side of Dayan, who knew how to play the media and knew how to make the best of the situation, also in political terms. During the time of his defense minister, he did two things. 66 years, the two main challenges was first Minister of Territories, the West Bank and Gaza. And I will say that in 67, he gave a specific order not to the IDF not to conquer Gaza. He knew that Gaza is a mess. Gaza is a hornet nest, I would say, not only a mess, but a hornet's nest. He didn't want to take Gaza, but things on the ground developed differently. The IDF just went in against his orders and took Gaza in the thick of the fighting, basically. So what he did was putting a lot of attention. He used to be called the Minister of the Territories because he put most of his time in how to run these territories with all this new Arab population that Israel was now controlling. And then the other big challenge was the attrition war. This war that went for 1.5 years with the Egyptian army trying to coerce the Israeli military into stepping away from the canal, which became a long attrition war, and hence the name, and then escalated. It was becoming part of the Cold War until the Soviets deployed a whole division, anti-aircraft division, SAMS missile in the area of the canal. And in the height of it, it was a direct engagement between Israeli pilot and Soviet pilots. So he was running this war as well as defense minister with all its complications. Of course, the big surprise in 1973, I'm not going to speak about it again. It's a whole different lecture about what happened there and what was the role of Dayan. I would only say that again, I'm in the book. I'm giving a kind of a revisionist interpretation to the role of Dayan. Of course, it wasn't his height, and he was responsible as defense minister. But things I found that things were much more, I would say, complicated and not as simple. And also things like luck and many different decisions that came into play in this episode that has influenced the result of the strategic surprise and also the defeats of the IDF in the first days. All in all, I think what Dayan was saying, even though he didn't exercise a lot of leadership at the time, because people looked up to him and he was quite pessimistic. But in terms of what he said, if you look at what he said, his assessments, I think they were spot on. Everything that he said, almost everything that he said was spot on in terms of his assessments of the situation. Okay, so this is the last chapter, and I will end with this, of course. The Peace of Egypt. Again, it's a fascinating chapter. Everything to do with negotiation. I will only say that Dayan was the persona to go to, both for the Americans and the Egyptians when they encounter a problem, mostly for the Americans. And of course, Camp David is known, and Dayan was frequently asked to solve the issues between Menachem Begin and Sadat. He always came up with different creative solutions. And there was one, I would quote one American diplomat who said, and this was in 1979, when the last time when Jimmy Carter was completely already fed up and he came to Cairo and then he came to Jerusalem trying to really patch together the last details of the peace agreement. And they came to Dayan's room and he gave them some solutions to some of the last items that were sticky items. And one of the Americans said, when they left the room, he said, senior diplomat, he said, "Thank God we have Dayan." So he was very instrumental in terms of his idea of really joining the government was to solve this war situation between, because he identified that this is the right moment, that we have a partner on the other side and we can do it. So therefore he wanted to join the government. I think he wanted to solve both issues, the Egyptian war and the Israeli-Palestinian conflict in his lifetime. Of course, as you know, he was able to achieve one of them, wasn't able to achieve the other. The other one is still an open one till today. But at least he had the satisfaction to see the peace deal with Egypt is being signed. I will end with a quote from his own book. Dayan was a prolific writer. He wrote poems. He wrote a lot of books. Some books are fascinating to read. He had this fascination with archaeology, as some of you know. And this is one of the things he wrote in the end of one of the books, a poem that titled as "At Nightfall." And he wrote it for his 3 children, actually, as a kind of something that they should follow up. And he said to them, "I walked my own path." It reminds a little bit the famous song of Frank Sinatra, actually. "I walked my own path and lived my own life. I knew how to do just 2 things, to sow, plow, and gather the grain. And when the cannons roared from the gates at our homes, to fight back. The field of our forefathers shall you work with the sword hanging above your bed." And I think, again, this is like what he saw himself as his essence of who he was, and the testimony for his children to follow up.